Good evening, everybody. My name is Todd Scholl. I'm the lead learner at the SCEA Center for Educator Wellness and Learning, and we are broadcasting live from my dining room tonight to talk to you tonight about mindfulness and school culture. Before we get started, I want to just remind everybody, if you look at the bottom of your screen, you'll see how you can join our movement at the SCEA by going to jointhescea.org, or you can text the word join to 48744. We hope everybody's having a great night tonight. And also, you can just connect with us. If you're not interested in joining, but you'd like to learn more about the SCEA, go to the scea.org/connect. So my guest tonight is Jelena Popovic. Jelena and I, back in 2016, created the first educator retreat, as far as we know. I mean, I don't know if they keep official records on that, but as far as we know, the first mindfulness educator retreat for teachers. And we did that at Newberry College. That was 2016. And then we did another one at Oconee State Park in 2017 with your good friend, Lucy McGregor. And so Jelena has been working in the field of mindfulness in different capacities for several years now. And I remember back, it was sometime in early 2016, the executive director at SCEA named Jane Turner went to one of your sessions, and she knew that I was interested in mindfulness and doing sessions on mindfulness. And she said, "There's someone you need to meet. Her name's Jelena Popovic." And she gave me your contact information. And then that summer we did our first retreat. So welcome to the show.
Thank you, Todd.
You're welcome. And so tell us a little bit. Why don't we start with, I think we talked about before we went on, just doing like a quick little check-in practice. Yeah. So we could do that, then model that for people.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I like to start anything with a little bit of centering.
Okay.
And especially live talking
Okay.
always helps to take some intentional breaths.
Okay.
So maybe just take a moment to, let go of what came before.
Okay.
And just spend a moment to take 5 intentional breaths.
Okay.
And have your eyes open or closed. Just be where your feet are.
All right.
Yeah.
I feel good.
Okay.
Yeah. Tell folks like how you got into this field of mindfulness, like, and what your experience is before we get started. Like, how did you get connected with this work?
Yeah, it has been almost a decade, even longer than a decade, that I started really trying to understand what is happening in education as related to social emotional learning. I have been at that time a practicing school psychologist within the Greenville County Schools in Greenville, South Carolina, and actually really frustrated by what I saw, the lack of attention to social emotional learning for both children and adults. So that's kind of kicked it off. And from that on, it was just learning about it. And mindfulness just came as a natural, first step in that journey.
Yeah. And so talk about some of the different roles that I know you've been involved heavily with the Mindful Schools organization. Maybe you could talk about that, and then some of the other roles that you've played, including the current one you're in right now.
Well, yeah. So as far as the learning back in 2010 or so, when now mindfulness is this buzzword, you can, see on the newsstands and everywhere. But at that time, you really needed to do some digging into finding anything related to, learning more about mindfulness that is in a secular realm.
Right.
So one of the things that I started is looking if there is anything for educators, and Mindful Schools came up as a Google search, actually. So I started taking their trainings and initial trainings and then curriculum training. And then in 2015, I started their year-long program, which was their signature program. And that really moved me in a rapid direction toward, being really passionate that this is a foundational practice and foundational learning in schools for anything, for academics, social, emotional, for any kind of learning, life skills.
Yeah. Yeah. And then after, I know you've helped now not only facilitate courses through Mindful Schools, you've helped create them as well.
Updating them.
Yeah. And then and now you're working with another organization called Whole School Mindfulness. Sorry. Yes. Whole School Mindfulness. Yes.
Yeah. As part of this whole school mindfulness, they are a nonprofit organization that support mindfulness directors being planted really in a school community. So that's what I'm doing right now. I am one of their 12 mindfulness directors in the United States, and I work in an early childhood education center in Greenville, South Carolina, supporting their mindfulness journey and integrating mindfulness not only with students, but also with staff and a whole community. So part of it, it's actually, whole school and community mindfulness. It's really working on mindfulness as a culture in school and beyond school.
Yeah. You and I were talking a couple weeks ago about how we've seen, since we started doing this work in mindfulness, we've seen it being co-opted as a way to talk about, like, we're going to improve student behavior as a tool of sort of compliance, and not only with students, but one of the big pushbacks that we've seen over the past few years develop. I've seen several teachers and sort of educator advocates talk about, like, well, mindfulness is just trying to get people to be comfortable with their own oppression, or like getting teachers to be comfortable with their challenging working conditions. And I think that's a really fair critique because it's been applied that way some places. And so you and I were talking about, like, the PBIS work and MTSS, and I know people are watching or familiar with those things. You and I have a similar idea in terms of mindfulness really not being used as a tool for compliance, but as a tool actually for, like, awakening to oppressive systems, or awakening to the things that are wrong in your environment, and then having the clarity and sort of the stillness or calmness that you need to address those issues effectively. Can you talk about that? Like, because you were talking about this, so I thought it was really interesting what you're talking about with PBIS.
So positive behavior intervention supports, right, are often used to as a really successful intervention to promote behaviors that we want to see in our students, right? With mindfulness, where it gets tricky is that mindfulness is experiential, is invitational, is relational practice. And if you add a component of evaluation and it's a non-judgmental practice, right? So you are adding a component of evaluation to it, which is, as an adult, you are giving a sticker or you are praising. You don't even need to give a tangible reward.
Right.
You can use just evaluative language, saying, this is a great mindful body right now, and that evaluative language, it goes against non-judgmental awareness we want to cultivate in mindfulness.
Right.
So mindfulness is not about calm. It is not about calm. That is a byproduct often of our practice, but that's not what we are striving. We're not striving for calm, compliant kids. We are actually really wanting liberation.
Right.
And not even wanting, that actually is a byproduct too of the practice, right?
Right. Yeah, I think it's really counterintuitive in our school culture. Everything is about striving, like even extracurricular activities like this. Well, like everything's about striving for greatness, and we hear that kind of language like student success and striving to be better than we were before. And and so it's counterintuitive when you go to a practice like mindfulness, and it's like you're like, okay, I guess I'm at level 1. How do I get to level 2 mindfulness? And there's that approach to it of one, or I've got to reach some kind of Zen state. And I think what I've noticed in my practice is I have to catch myself striving for those things, striving for a particular state of mind that I maybe experienced the last time I practiced, or striving like some sense of like, what kind of wisdom am I going to pick up here? And when I do that, then the practice is inevitably not as valuable as I think it probably could be if I just kind of let go of striving and just do the practice, just be with the practice.
Yeah.
But I think that a lot of teachers here, when I go and I know you've done lots of sessions, and I've done probably 200 or 300 sessions with teachers on mindfulness, and they hear this like they hear this person come in and say, well, just breathe, we're going to just breathe. And I think it comes across as like kind of sometimes with some folks as like this tone deaf thing. Like, do you not understand what I'm going through? Like, I don't have time to sit down and breathe for 20 minutes a day. Like, when am I going to find time to do that? And how is that, how is that going to solve the problem that I'm being exploited here? I'm being overworked. I don't get breaks. I'm completely drained, completely burned out. I'm not being paid and compensated the way I should be, especially for the extra time that I'm putting in. By the way, if you hear dogs in the background, they're just jealous and want to be a part of the live stream. Anyway, so what do you tell when you talk with educators? How do you kind of like navigate that part of it where you sort of acknowledge what they're going through, but also say, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater? Because that's what I feel is happening. Like with self-care or mindfulness, people are like, there's just like this bad taste in their mouth with it. And so there's just this automatic reaction, like, that's just bullshit. Like, I don't want to self-care or, whatever. And then I think that those things kind of get thrown out or rejected. So how do you thread that?
Yeah, it kind of threads back to that previous point around what is really mindfulness and what is not, right? And if mindfulness is not about calmness, so me coming there to tell you to be more calm person, more, to take care of yourself in a way that involves breath or whatever practice I'm introducing, right? And if it's an invitation, that's first of all. So it's not something that you can, you need to be mandated to do. And I can see in some schools some schools are taking that route. The administration kind of said, oh, there is this mindfulness thing. Let's all try it out, and mandating their staff to go through, mindfulness workshops and courses. And I have not seen that work. at all, because it is not invitational,
Right.
right? Because it's an experiential and relational practice too. And I think a lot of the times in education, we are also really focused on how hard it is, because that's our experience, right? Day to day, it is really challenging.
Right.
And we also forget, and it's easy to forget, and that's part of mindfulness practice, to really soak the good things in.
Yeah.
To pay attention to the good things too. So it is a balance. It's a practice that can help us see the good and savor the good, and then be awakened to challenges as well.
Right.
So there is that, in a practice, once you start practicing it, it helps you with equanimity. It helps you with that balance, understanding that it's not all bad or all good,
Right.
But yeah.
So yeah, I think that's the misconception is that mindfulness is there to, that the reason why your administrator or your school leadership wants you to engage in mindfulness is so that you'll just calm down and stop complaining so much. Like, and that may be the intent of some school leaders. But I know that the work that we're doing, that's absolutely not the intent, to just get everybody to calm down and breathe through their exploitation or through their whatever oppression they're going through. I think that's I was speaking with some folks who teach at a correctional institute a couple of weeks ago, and I was telling them, I want you to use mindfulness so that you're more awake to it, that you see the reality around you clearly, whatever that is. Like you said, it's not all bad, it's not all good, all of it. Just so you see all of it clearly, and then you're dropping some of the, hopefully dropping some of the self-judgment, some of the cognitive distortions that we have around the experiences that we're having, and just can see clearly and objectively what's happening. And then you have like this clearness about, here's what I need to do about it. Like, I need to talk to this person, or I need to have this kind of conversation, or I need to join the SCEA and advocate for myself, or just having the ability to see the environment in a way that's, I think,
As is.
Right.
Yeah.
Because this is what we do, is like, we see the environment, and then there's a lot of times it's catastrophizing, or it's living in denial, and like, I don't want to see the bad stuff. I don't want you to talk about the bad stuff. I don't want to hear about the bad stuff. I'm just focused on my kids and doing the good stuff. And like, we see a lot of teachers who do that. That's their coping strategy, is I'm just going to focus on what's right, because I don't want to deal with that other stuff. And then you got the other teachers, other folks that, they're just, it's almost that they can't take their eye off of what is wrong. And mindfulness isn't asking you for it to be an either or proposition.
Yeah, it's a moment to moment awareness of all.
Yeah. We talked about, like, one of the things our conversation made me think about was student behavior. And so I was thinking about how, we look at student behavior through a lens of, I'm a teacher, I'm trying to teach this lesson, and I was told I have to teach bell to bell, and these students are going from class and being taught bell to bell to bell to bell. They may have 5 minutes between classes at a high school, and then I see them disrupting my classroom, whether it's through talking or whatever they're doing, they're disrupting my classroom. And then there's this kind of judgment about the student. And what I've started to wonder about is the systems that our students find themselves in, is there what we label as maladaptive behavior? Is it actually just normal human reaction to being put inside a box all day and being taught bell to bell, which doesn't align with what we know about neuroscience. That's, humans need breaks. Our brains need time off and on task and off task. Is it just a normal human response, but we're labeling it because they're not being compliant with the program? We're labeling it as maladaptive or bad behavior, and then they're getting ISS and OSS, and then we come in with a mindfulness thing and say, well, let's hope that this will help them be more compliant and go with the program.
Right.
And you and I were saying, no, like what we hope would happen is kind of the opposite, that these young people would see that the system, even though we have a lot of great teachers doing the best they can, but the system of education, because of the accountability movement and the pressures placed upon administrators to teachers to students on standardized test scores, has created this sort of toxic system that we want people to be aware of and push back against, because it's not aligned with the pace of society, even like getting up and going to school, rushing to school, and then going bell to bell to bell, then going after school to practices or whatever, and then we can like hurry up and get home, and then we've got to have a rush through dinner, hurry up and get your homework done, and it's like on rinse and repeat that over and over again. And kids, I think it's probably a human thing to push back on that.
Yeah. So what you are speaking of, it's this culture of complete doing. We are really what we are programming our nervous system, our brains in a consistent state of doing, right? And they are, we have within our nervous system doing and being modes, right? Those are two different systems, and we are consistently practicing doing,
right,
and really inconsistently practicing being, right? So what mindfulness is inviting into those systems, it's a practice of being, to interrupt that continuous culture of doing. And so I see mindfulness as actually really a practice that can support us in understanding how much doing we have been doing in schools,
right,
and how actually that is harming not only our students but adults in the building. That we can do so much, right? We can do so much, and mindfulness offers us an opportunity and awareness to say, hey, wait a second, this is too much, right? I can't take it anymore, right? Once you sit and kind of realize, whoa, my nervous system has been, a lot of times when people start practicing, they're noticing their fatigue, right? They're noticing that they're noticing for the first time their thoughts that are racing, because we have been perpetual doing.
Yeah, and it feels to me like I noticed this in myself, and I've and even in my kids, like when you do take time to be, you can't really relax into it because there's like this guilt, like, but I should be doing something. I can't just sit here. Like, I can't just sit here. I've got to be doing, like, there's laundry to be done, and there's dishes, and there's all this other stuff that I need to be doing. And I could be, you're watching social media, like I could be practicing my guitar, or I could be, going out for a run, or I could be, redesigning my house, or like, it's almost like there's like this ethic that's been built into us that when we get up until we go to bed, like if we're not doing something, we're wasting our time. And I think that it's almost like we have to reteach ourselves and our kids how to just simply be in a room, like just to be, just to sit on a park bench and no striving.
Yeah, rest is as productive
Yeah.
as doing something, because rest allows us actually to be prepared to do things intentionally. Yeah. I think we don't often are being so that when we are doing things intentionally and with a purpose. It's not just for a sake of doing.
Right.
It's, are you in doing noticing being? Are you while doing being in that moment and really noticing what you're doing? So one of the things that when I start to teach and facilitate for educators, one of the first things I invite them to is, can you notice your being while doing? So in any activity, can you notice what you're doing?
Right.
No matter what you're doing, you're taking a walk. Can you take a walk without listening to anything? Just taking a walk and
Right.
seeing what is, so that's how you start infusing being into doing. And that might be for some folks, I know that's one of the first steps that opens this practice. That is one door of accessibility for them.
Yeah, I really struggle with that. Like I've noticed when I'm doing the dishes or just doing like folding clothes or anything like that, I'm wanting to listen to a podcast or I'm wanting to, think about other things. Like it's really hard for me to focus just on one task if it isn't a really interesting task. Like you said, like going on a walk is not interesting. I mean, it can be, but just in and of itself, the walk isn't interesting. So I'm listening to a podcast or a book, and I noticed that I really do struggle with just doing one thing at a time. And when I'm driving or anything, just struggling with that. And I think it's because we're conditioned to feel like we've got to multitask all the time, especially if it's something doesn't require like a deep level of attention, like the dishes, that we have to multitask. Like I got to be learning something too, or I got to be entertaining myself while I'm doing this.
What is interesting, it's when you're talking about this, it's my being in this particular early childhood education center, Minds in Motion in Greenville, South Carolina. And just my being there, it actually feels like that is an important part of foundational part in starting to shift the culture of that doing.
Right.
So when we talk about mindfulness in school culture, I think the foundational part is that infusion of being into the culture. One of the first steps is, how can we as adults start to model that for our young people?
Yeah. And I think, unfortunately, and and there's no judgment here from me about this with specific people. It's more of a cultural critique than it is critique of specific people, because I've done this as too. But I think we're doing the opposite. I think we're like giving the message to kids, you need to do more. You need to keep busy. You need to, like, I need you to constantly be going. And then you see when we get into adulthood, what do? We get up, and to get started in that doing thing, we drink a bunch of coffee, so then we can have the energy to do. And then at the end of the day, we're like, well, I want to go to bed. So then we drink wine or beer or something like that, try to like turn off that doing mind so that we can actually unwind a little bit right before we go to bed. But I mean, it just feels like the school culture is putting on steroids this thing you're talking about, in terms of we've got to constantly be doing. It didn't used to be that way. It used to be, we saw classrooms where kids would take naps, or the kindergarten was a half day, or we would see longer recesses. And now they like you were talking about, like you've seen middle schools where there is no recess. And then even educators, they don't get that they've had so much time, planning time, and just downtime taken away from them. Even like having a 30-minute break is like, a lot of teachers don't have any downtime during the day. And it's like the pressure of this accountability movement has said, we've got to extract every second of the day has to be towards improving this data. That's what it feels like. It feels like they've just taken the stranglehold on the day and said, every second you're going to be teaching and learning.
That's right.
and we're not going to take a break from that. And even like when I was teaching an elective and broadcast, I remember they were trying to get me to do like, you have to do like a daily oral math or a daily oral language at the beginning of class. I'm like, I'm teaching broadcasting. Can you give these kids like some time in the day when you're not trying to prepare them for the test? It's like it's just really, really frustrating. And then I go to a school, and you've seen some of the clips. I go to a school in Floyd, like Springhouse or like Blue Mountain. And I go to Blue Mountain. And this is, for those of you watching, we're putting together a documentary about these schools in Floyd. And I go to Blue Mountain School, and they have hammocks in the woods, and they take the kids out there, and the kids are taking naps. I see kids climbing trees. I see a massive field for recess. I see kids, going out in nature. When I was at Springhouse, they took these kids out and they had them, go off into the woods and just sit reflectively for a while and then come back and talk about what they reflected upon. And it was so beautiful because it's so in line with the human spirit. And what I noticed is that the teachers and the students there in general seem so much happier, so much more just kind of like in line with themselves, rather than rushing around from bell to bell, from class to class. I got to hurry up and get there. I got to get there. I got to get, oh, I got to do this. Like just this mad rush all the time. Like this is like chronic, at minimum, low level tension that we place throughout the school day. Like, you got to hurry up and get to where you're going. There's just no pullback. And even like I said, after school, what we do with kids, and like now we've got kids who do travel ball and all this kind of stuff. And we put so much pressure on them because I think the adults feel like, well, if I don't do this, then my kid's going to fall behind the other kids, and then they're not going to have the same opportunities. So then we're all kind of like lost. Like, what do we do? And I've been trying to push, like my son's going to graduate with a college degree at 18, and I've not pushed him at all. I've tried to tell him, slow down. But I think the culture is telling him, the faster you go, the better. And it feels like the antidote to all of this is, that mindfulness is a huge part of it, because the first thing that has to happen is people have to wake up and realize that the system that they're in, educators and students realize that the system that they're in is not aligned with their humanity, and that conflict, that I don't know, that sense that it's just not sitting well. I think it needs to be clearly understood and clearly seen.
I think the first thing that needs to happen, Todd, is to pause. I think pause is a radical first step, because once you pause and stop, things become more clear. You see how much you have been running and privileging doing. We are definitely privileging that over anything else.
Yeah.
I feel like pausing is one of the most radical things you can do.
Yeah.
If that is pausing while you're doing something, to really ask yourself, what I am doing in this moment. Am I doing one thing, or am I multitasking?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Our brains are not built for multitasking.
Yeah.
We are fooling ourselves that we can actually multitask.
Right.
We can't. So can you unitask? Can you be in what you're doing fully?
Mm-hmm.
And pause and ask yourself, am I really being here? Are you being where your feet are? Or is your mind 10 steps into the future or into the past? Yeah. Where are you right now? Right? So are you with your body? And how do you know that? Right? How do you know? How do you feel in your body? Where, So these are the questions, I think, that we need to ask ourselves, because what ultimately in schools, where you can have the most incredible curriculum, right? But how this curriculum is, how kids are invited into, first of all. Is it experiential? Is it relational? A lot of the things are not. But your nervous system actually is the most powerful intervention.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is your nervous system ready to be, right?
Yeah.
In order to do all of these things. And for a lot of us, our nervous systems are not ready.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's I think we're just seeing the consequences of being out of alignment. When you put yourself in this perpetual state of go, 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 do all day, we see the physical health outcomes of it, the stress and the stress related illness. We see the mental health issues that come up. We see increasing levels of anxiety and depression. I know, educator stress is through the roof. Our students are experiencing all kinds of mental health disorders. And I think it's a direct side effect of this just incessant drive to just be better and to do better. Like there seems to be no end in it. Like there's just these arbitrary benchmarks or goals that we're going to set. And then once the average school district gets that mastered, then they're just going to keep raising it and just keep pushing what used to be a college thing is down the high school to middle school to elementary. We're seeing stuff that used to be in the second grade is now in kindergarten. Why? Why are we in a rush? I don't understand why our society's in a rush for kids to get to a certain place, other than it's just, and this gets into a controversial thing of like, what is driving this, right? Is it the economics that are driving it? Is we're in a global economy and we want to compete with other countries. And so in order for us to compete with other countries, if we fall behind those countries, then economically we're going to fall behind. We don't want to do that. So it all comes down to this drive to meet the needs of capitalists, meet the needs of business, and meet the needs of politicians. Stephanie asked, and by the way, Stephanie, thank you for tuning in and for all of your comments. Stephanie asked, so how do I get there? And I'm not sure what you mean by there. But I'm going to assume, like, how does she get there? Like in terms of a mindful state? I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by that. If you can ask that question, what you mean? I don't know what you mean by there. So what do you think about, like, maybe what she's asking is like, okay, we're defining a problem here. How do we solve it?
I think, ultimately a practice of mindfulness is actually not about solving.
Right.
So I think that's where we get
you started
into
off with that, and I'm going right back.
No, but it is one of the traps, right? It's one of the traps around solving things. Right. I think, once you start practicing mindfulness, one of the things that you're realizing, there is nothing to solve, everything to feel. Everything to just experience. Right. So it's how can we experience this, but how this experience can change, and if this particular moment is the one that conditions the next moment, right? So what are we doing in this moment that can support us, right? That the next moment to come, it is going to be different if our intention is different.
Right.
If we are present for this moment, and we feel it, then we have discernment. Then we have certain clarity. What happens in the next moment?
Yeah.
Right. So it's I think it's how do you practice and know that, you might feel discomfort.
Yeah.
You might awaken to something that you don't want to experience, right? You might see things that you didn't notice before, because mindfulness is a practice of awareness. So what do you do with that?
Mm-hmm.
Again, it gives you some certain clarity, so then you can discern intentionally instead of just acting upon impulses. It is supporting you and with more clarity.
Yeah.
So your actions have more intentions in them. Does that make sense?
And it makes total, and I can feel myself when I'm in alignment with that and when I'm not.
Yes.
Like when I go around and I'm rushing around all day and I'm worried about my to-do list or a problem, and I'm perseverating on something and kind of going through those thought loops on problems. And I go, especially if I go through several days of that, I notice myself, like all of a sudden I'll catch myself, oh wow. And the metaphor I've used in retreats before is, if you've ever swum out in the ocean and you turn your back to the shore, all of a sudden the tide can take you out, and you look back and you're like, holy crap, I didn't realize how far away from the shore I was, how far away I've gotten, how far this tide has pulled me out. And I haven't been intentional or paying attention to the tide pulling me out. And then it's a matter of like, how do I come back to my shore? How do I come back to that center? And I think that's what Stephanie is like. The answer I would give to you, Stephanie, is, like when I'm consistently doing the practice, I notice myself staying closer to that shore.
Yeah, I think one of the powerful practices to really, like, if it is a whole body experience, right, is to really attune in what moments in your daily life you feel constriction.
Yeah.
Or you feel expansion.
Yeah.
And just noticing where you feel your muscles, your shoulders, a lot of tension. We hold our neck and shoulders in our chest. Where do you feel constriction? Do you feel constriction? Yeah. What are you doing when you're doing that? When you're feeling that? And when do you feel expansion? So just tracking those two, constriction and expansion, can be a powerful practice to start with. Yeah.
And I also I don't know if it was Dr. Rickanson who said this, but you and I have talked about this, and I talk about this in sessions, is, he talks about, because I think what you're getting at is building an awareness.
Yes.
Like building an awareness of where, like I'll notice, for example, I use the getting into traffic as an example. So I get into a traffic jam, and the first state is I'm unconsciously incompetent. So I'm just I'm pissed off, and I'm not even aware of it. I just I'm just mad. And then he says, then you realize you go to you're conscious of your incompetence. So then I'm like, oh yeah, I'm really mad here, and I really can't even control it. But I'm aware that this is why am I doing this? Why am I getting mad at traffic? And then you get consciously competent. So then you have to work at it. And you have to really think about it. It's just sort of short circuit that natural tendency to get mad at the traffic, and then you have that, but you're able to do it and stay competent. And then he said the fourth state is where you're unconsciously competent, where you're just you go to traffic and your default is this isn't a problem. It doesn't even, nothing even comes up. So that's the rubric that I use, kind of like what you're talking about, where when I notice tension coming up, where am I on that rubric? Am I just being well, if I'm unconscious, I'm probably not even being aware of it, but at least I can retroactively reflect on that and go, I got really upset there, and I wonder, what I need to pay attention to there.
Right.
So I think that's Stephanie, I would say we're talking about just building an awareness of where that, where you are along that journey in different aspects of your life, without it, again, though it sounds like I need to get to level 4 at each state, without it striving, but it's just an acknowledgement of the reality of where you are without judgment
and curiosity.
Yeah.
I would say one particular, mindfulness is all about curiosity.
Yeah.
It's all about what is this? Isn't this interesting? No matter if it is pleasant, neutral, or unpleasant.
Yeah.
Isn't this interesting? And just really curiously explore your experience.
Yeah, and I think that's really great. And like in Ted Lasso, when he says, and it's the Walt Whitman quote of "Be curious, not judgmental." If you can start with yourself, like, where is this coming from? Why am I getting upset? And just sort of reflecting on it. But then what's interesting is, I think once you start to see those processes in yourself, because you can start to, for me, one of the things that mindfulness has been great about is it hasn't undone all of my sort of neuroses and things, but it's helped me at least see them, sort of like the process in them, so then I at least have a chance to sort of short circuit it at some point along the way. So I see it coming up quicker.
Mm-hmm.
So that instead of being bent out of shape for 30 minutes about something, maybe it's 5 minutes. Like, I still might have a reaction to something, but maybe it's less intense or less in duration, which is, reclaiming, like Dan Harris, we've talked about him, like 10% happier. It's like, if I can just reclaim maybe 10, 20% of that time where I would have been still been out of shape, still mad, still holding that grudge, still like frustrated. And I've just kind of come to this place of peace quicker, that to me is worth the practice. I've found incredible value in that. And then what I would say for educators in particular is, if you can examine yourself without judgment and be curious about your own behaviors, then you can start to apply that to your student behaviors.
Yeah.
So instead of having these reactions to the student behavior, you can say, I wonder what's really going on here. Instead of me saying, that's just a bad kid. He's just like, he's just a troubled kid. It's like having this curiosity about, I wonder what's going on in his home life. I wonder what's happening to him. I wonder what his history is all about. I wonder
what is happening with me in this moment.
Right.
Right. Start what is happening. Why am I agitated? Why is this behavior agitated? Start with questioning. Start with curiosity yourself.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. It's that's a good point. Because that's the other thing. So, like, when the maladaptive behavior is taking place, it's all about the child, but then looking at, like, why am I so aggravated by this kid? Why is this pissing me off so bad? Like, that he's like, and it's like, but without judgment,
right?
Because that's the other thing that we want to do, is we want
with kindness and compassion toward yourself.
And that's what gets misconstrued in this work, though, is I think the educator, when we're talking about this, thinks that we're saying, well, you're supposed to be calm all the time. You're supposed to be able to just see that misbehavior and be chill all the time. And that's not what we're saying, right?
No, that's exactly not what we are saying. It's like, it's not about being calm. It's about being curious. It's a different C.
It's a different C. I like that. So it's like, I think that's, but for me, like the big thing that mindfulness has done for me is to help me wake up to things that I was unconscious about, just to have a consciousness about, why am I getting so upset here?
And the question is,
without judgment.
Right. And the question is, then how can you really, it's like this whole mandated professional development around this, how can you mandate somebody to be more aware? That's why it's not working, right? It's an invitation, and people would come to it that are ready to come to it.
Right.
That are going to ask the question, okay, this is interesting. What can I learn? What can I learn?
I think that's something, professional development has typically been about going to teachers and saying, here's something new you can do with your kids. And I think we need much, much more professional development aimed at here's what you can do for you. Here's what you can do for yourself.
That's right.
And then what happens is when you start to transform within, then your teaching transforms. And we want to talk a little bit about teaching mindfully rather than being a mindful teacher, like teaching mindfully. Talk a little bit about that.
Mindfulness.
Yeah.
So this is an invitation that I think I'm really passionate about. Teaching mindfulness, if you're not practicing, is not a practice that I would recommend. Because if you have not experienced what you're teaching, you are teaching from a very unauthentic place.
Yeah.
And we know how kids respond to unauthentic teaching.
Yeah.
It doesn't, if something comes unauthentically, it's not coming from you, it's bypassed or resisted, right? So in order to have a relationship, learning is relational. In order to have a relationship, you need to have a relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
And that relationship to yourself and to this practice is what is teacher, right? Mm-hmm. So you can teach anything mindfully. You don't need to teach mindfulness in order to teach mindfully.
So, like, do you give an example, like, so for people who are listening, so specifically, like the distinction between teaching mindfulness and teaching mindfully?
Right. So you are, I don't know, you're teaching broadcast journalism, right? Mm-hmm. What would that look for you, Todd, if you are teaching mindfully?
So what happened was interesting in my career. When I was first teaching broadcast journalism, I was thinking about it very technically. Like, here's what we need to do. We need to create a news program, and the kids need to know how to use the cameras and the different pieces of equipment and all that. And I thought about it very, very technically, but I never dug down and said, well, why are we even doing this in the first place?
Right.
Like, why are we teaching kids broadcast journalism? Is it just so that they know how to turn on a camera and frame up a shot and put up a tripod? Like, what's the point of this? And it took me a long time to start thinking about it. I think from this mindful perspective of, we can create content that has a positive impact on the school and community. It's not just about teaching this technical process. It's about giving kids an opportunity to really start creating content about things that matter. And that's when my career shifted, because all of a sudden then the content creation became about something much more meaningful than a technical process. And I think that's kind of where we need to get to is to stop looking at teaching as this process of getting kids to ultimately score well on a bubble and test. It's like the more we're mired in that kind of mindset, the more we deaden education and really leave kids uninspired. And the only kids who are left inspired are those who see, like, if I jump through these hoops that they're telling me to jump through, I don't really want to. But if I jump through these hoops, then I get to go to this particular college. I get to maybe get into this particular career so I can, buy things for myself. I mean, like, they just see this long-term advantage of jumping through the hoops. Right. But then the kids who are living more authentically, who are actually being mindful and say, but I don't care about that. Materialism doesn't matter to me. I don't want to go to college. I don't care what my career is. I just want to live authentically with who I am. And that's what's important to me. And I'm not willing to do this bullshit hoop jumping anymore with you. And so what does that come out? What does that look like? That looks like a kid who's got bad grades and is not behaving is what it looks like. Right? I mean, that's what it looks like. But maybe those kids are the sane ones. Maybe they're the ones that are the most sane in this whole system, is the ones that are saying, your system sucks. And I'm not going to just follow along with the program anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what like my goal is with the center and with these conversations and with the upcoming documentary is for educators to wake up to that too and start pushing back, for them to collectively to come together and say, this system isn't working for us anymore. It's definitely not working for our students anymore. We can quit, right? Like I'm an educator, I can quit. Students can't, because students have to go to school.
That's right.
And this system's no longer serving them well. And if we need proof, we can just look around our society, look at the dysfunction, look at the violence, look at the, the inability for us to have conversations about anything meaningful without getting into, insults with each other, the conflict, the interpersonal conflict, the family problems that exist, and drug abuse and addiction, and all. I mean, like gangs and violence and crime. I mean, like we see evidence of the dysfunction everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's really up to, I think, educators to come together and to say, we've got to change the system. And so to me, it starts with them, educators and parents, to come to it. And the thing that I get, it's hard to do, is I don't want to come across as a person who's saying I'm against it's like not a critique of public schools as an institution, because public schools as public education is amazing. That's like the foundation of our democracy. We got to protect it. It's the systems that have been placed on the public schools by politicians and leaders who know nothing about neuroscience and know nothing about human psychology, know nothing about Maslow, know nothing about the human condition in a way other than they're just looking at, give me some metrics that I can show the public to show that your schools are functioning. And the easiest way to do that is to give these kids these bubble-in tests, hurry up and get that data back, and hopefully we've done a little bit better. We're going to give you a report card. And if your report card's good, then you get to, pat yourself on the back, say you won the blue ribbon or whatever. And if it's bad, we're going to shame you to the public. Sorry, I went on a rant there.
You did. And it's okay.
Thoughts, Jelena?
Yeah. I mean, the thought, there's so many thoughts, and there is also just pause. And there is also just pause and say, hey, like, whew, that's heavy.
Yeah.
Right? What you just shared is hard and heavy.
Yeah.
Where we are. And just feel that. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's what I'm inviting in. It's just, that's what I mean. There is a lot to feel, because I don't necessarily think we're feeling it.
Yeah.
I think we are living it.
Mm-hmm.
We are being in it. We are doing it, but we are not feeling it.
Yeah.
We don't feel how actually it's unsustainable.
Right.
That the system that we are being a part of is not sustainable.
That's right.
Not sustainable for us. That's why you can have, educators returning, and the educators are leaving the profession. You cannot recruit educators. There are education, schools that are closing. But it was really interesting. One thing that I have noticed both in, within Mindful Schools and Whole School is there have been some educators I have worked in, particularly Mindful Schools, who have been out of education, teaching mostly, sharing about mindfulness practice, not being in the classroom. They started as classroom teachers, or like me, school psychologists, and then moving on to really work on consulting and doing this. What is interesting, most of us are returning back into the classroom. When everybody is leaving, we are coming back. And that's something to really ponder upon, because we feel that we have a capacity to hold the challenges post-pandemic, so
Yeah.
a lot of my friends and colleagues are actually returning full-time to the classroom. And it begs the question, why are we returning when everybody's leaving? Right?
Yeah.
And I feel because we feel that the practice and what we can offer in our way of being can be very supportive.
Yeah.
And it's actually an act of compassion.
Yeah.
What can I give to you that you don't have?
Right.
And how can we share that? How can I share it with you?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And we had a little over a week ago, we had Jennifer Garrett from Sarah on talking about the record number of vacancies and departures in South Carolina. And I think that is just a direct, I think it's a lot of things contributing to that. But ultimately, I would say it comes down to like the conditions that educators find themselves in. And I think it's a result of a toxic system. It's a system, and we have to change it. And so as we close, I just want to say to people, like, the how do we change it is there's a lot of different things we need to do, but one of the things that I would just encourage you to consider is being a part of our movement at the SCEA, because the SCEA and the National Education Association, we are dedicated to creating better working conditions for our teachers. We won 30 minutes of unencumbered time for elementary school teachers starting next year. I was just surprised to hear how many. I've talked to so many elementary school teachers who go in and they don't have a break all day. They don't. They have to go to lunch with their kids, and it's insane. Like, we don't do that in most other professions. You get a break, and so consider being a part of our movement, because that's what we've talked about this. The Center for Educator Wellness and Learning. Our mission is to improve the inner and outer lives of educators, and mindfulness. Is really kind of does both. I think has the potential to do both. But we have to couple, talking about mindfulness and self-care with a strong advocacy for helping educators improve the conditions that they have to enter into every single day, whether it's large class sizes or just not having breaks or being overworked and too much paperwork and multiple duties and things like that. It's just we've got to help them have a more reasonable workload and take some of that stress off, while we're also teaching them, how do you go within and just be for a little bit without constantly doing. So, anything last thing you want to say? Anything you want to plug?
I just want to say thank you
off?
to you and
thanks.
to SCEA, and to all the work that you are doing. And if you're interested in mindfulness, they are, Todd is a great resource.
And go to mindfulschools.org.
Mindfulschools.org does this. We have courses and workshops. If you're interested in becoming a mindfulness director through a whole school, there is an application process that is closing soon. So go to wholeschoolmindfulness.org. They are actually Mindful Magazine 2 days ago voted them #1 nonprofit to donate this season. So
that's cool.
Really
cool. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being here tonight and for your time. And for everybody watching, just if you will, consider look at the bottom of the screen there, jointhescea.org, or text the word join to 48744. You can also connect with us at the scea.org/connect. I do want to preview, we will have another live stream coming up. Ooh, let me take this off. Another live stream coming up on the 13th. So December 13th from 7 to 8 o'clock, we'll have Amy Strong coming on, and we're going to be talking about protecting trans youth, which is a really, really important subject, and one that we can't allow the narrative to be driven by folks who we'll just say are unenlightened about the subject, or who are don't have the best interest of trans youth in mind. We've got to definitely have a positive conversation. So I hope you'll join us for that conversation on December 13th from 7 to 8. Thank you so much for tuning in to tonight's episode. And you can find all of these live streams on the website at cool.us, at CEWL.us. You'll find this within the next couple of days. You'll find the entire live stream from tonight, as well as every other live stream that we do, you'll find on that website. If you have any questions, feel free to email me, toddscholl@gmail.com. And until the next time, you guys have a wonderful weekend. And thanks again, Jelena.
Thank you.
All right.